Speaking truth and power, unlocking minds, one day at a time, day at a time. Speaking truth and power, unlocking minds, one day at a time, day at a time. Truth of the matter is that truth really matters, yeah. Truth of the matter is that truth really matters, yeah. In the beginning, I was back and forth like badminton, lacking wisdom, no direction for proper decisions. I heard my bro had a show, so I started to listen. Truth of the matter, ain't no comparing the competition. The kid feeling blessed, cause it's clear as when Dex. After talking with Dex, I know just where to step. I know the path gon' be narrow, but my eyes on the sparrow. And the truth of the matter is that truth really matters. Truth of the matter, that truth really matters. Hey, truth of the matter.
Greetings and salutations. I want to say welcome to Truth of the Matter and thank you for joining me. I am your host, Dexter Peggins. Listen, in the immortal words of the great Rakim, it's been a long time. I shouldn't have left you without a dope rhyme to step to. But all jokes aside, listen, I am glad to be back. On today's show, I want to talk about some things that I believe will help to reestablish the foundation of this show. I want to share some things that I've been going through, some things that have transpired in my time of absence. And I also want to share a few things, a few insights that I think may be beneficial to you if you find yourself working through a process of recovering from a hiatus of sorts. But listen, before I get started, allow me to share with you the quote of the day. And today's quote is simply this: there are times when convenience robs men of courage. I'm going to say it again. There are times when convenience robs men of courage. Today's episode is entitled Missing in Action. As I was thinking about what I wanted to share on today, this term missing in action kept coming to mind. And if you're not familiar with this term missing in action or the acronym MIA, it simply really speaks to a missing service member who's come up lost in action. They haven't returned from a battle. Their body has not been found, and it's not known whether or not they have been captured. In essence, no one knows their whereabouts. They know at one point in time they were engaged in some type of battle or conflict, but in the midst of the engagement, they came up missing. Allow me to put it another way, because we're not necessarily talking about the military and military terminology, but as a reference, this term missing in action can also be looked at when a person makes the initial commitment to engage in a thing only to not be found while the work is yet still going on. That might sound more familiar with people at work, and someone comes up missing. But I want to tell you that in my own process, in my time of self reflection, I had to accept the hard truth that I myself was a person who had become missing in action. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the grounds for being missing in action is the absence of a body with no known whereabouts, which suggests that the missing could be deceased, as their body is yet to be recovered, or they could be a prisoner and no one knows that they have or have not been captured. I don't fall within that spectrum. But what I will say is that I have become a casualty of disappointment. And this disappointment caused me to pull back beyond the points of wanting to engage. Ultimately, what I found myself in this time of hiatus was is that I relegated myself to attending or tending to my immediate responsibilities, but I dismissed the significance of what it was that I personally wanted to pursue. And for that, I apologize. Now, you might be asking or saying to yourself, Dex, why are you coming down hard on yourself? And it's because I'm a person that has come to believe that ultimately we often give ourselves permission to not be accountable. And this absence of accountability, it can lead to this disappearance or this being missing in action because I'm not holding myself accountable to the thing that I know I'm supposed to do. I'm giving myself space to walk away from it. And to me, that is a great sign of irresponsibility. See, for me, this thing called truth of the matter is not something that I randomly came up with. I wasn't sitting at home like, ooh, let me start a podcast, because the reality is I have a lot on my plate. But no, I look at this Truth of the Matter podcast as a calling of sorts, because I recognize that there's a lot of men who look like me who don't have a lot of spaces to get clarity, to come together, to hear a voice that inspires and encourages. And so the reality is that um, I wanted this platform to serve as a space where we can have truthful and transparent conversation, but not just conversation. I wanted this platform to be where solutions and answers will come forward from those moments of transparency. Listen, what I'll tell you is this: I am beyond the stage in life where it is acceptable to be a prisoner of good intention. Let me say that again. I am beyond the stage of life where it is acceptable to be a prisoner of good intention. Oftentimes, what we have is we have people who start things, really great things, with the right intention, with the right motive, but for whatever reason, they do not see it to its rightful conclusion. And when we don't see a thing to its rightful conclusion, it becomes not only a detriment to ourselves, but also to a detriment to others, because they are depending upon what it is that we have created. And so I myself, I want to see this thing to its rightful conclusion. I have a vision concerning this platform. And in that vision, I see it reaching hundreds of thousands of people, serving as a catalyst for positive change by motivating, inspiring, and encouraging people to go after the things that they identify as a vision for their own lives. I ultimately want to help men become better men. And so, for those who have followed this show in the past, and even those who are brand new to this space, you might be asking, okay, Dexter, I hear you apologizing. So, where have you been for the last 2 years? And what I'll tell you is that in these past 2 years, I've really been in the space of self examination. I've been asking myself, how did I get caught up in these disappointments? And what I'll tell you is that oftentimes for myself, those disappointments that I allowed myself to get caught up in, they were rooted in my inability to effectively communicate my own expectations from friends, from business partners, and even from myself. And so, what I have had to do in this time is I had to take a look at my own personal value system. I had to ask myself, what values are important enough to hold on to? That when adversity comes, because trust me, adversity will come, I have to have the right perspective to endure and to overcome based upon that value system. And so, what I'll tell you is that this time has been needed. It has been a needed time of self reflection. And what I would encourage you all is that recognize those times when you yourselves may need to step back. But I hope that you would do so in a manner better than I did, where everything's not abrupt, but you're able to effectively communicate your need. Listen, I am involved in a number of things in the community. I have a nonprofit organization that provides mentorship services for at risk youth. I'm also a minister. I lead a group as a spiritual leader. And so those things have not been neglected. But the reality is that I know that there are some people who do not know me in the capacity of a minister. There are people who do not know me in the capacity of a mentor because they might not fall in that demographic of at-risk youth. But I also understand there are some people who find value in the things that I share. And so, to you, once again, I apologize for my absence. One thing that I want to do on today is I want to talk to my brothers, and I want to tell you guys that listen. One thing that is commonly lost in translation is how hard it is to be a man. This is not this statement of being hard to be a man, being difficult to be a man. Um, it does not minimize the challenges of women. So, sisters, I'm not overlooking the fact that women have to deal with obstacles that I'm not aware of. And so, for my uh, female listeners, please don't hear me saying something that I'm not saying. However, I do want to highlight that there's an embedded sense of pressure that belongs to manhood. I want you all to think about this. At the age of 18, in most instances, we as men, we're expected to have it figured out. You might be saying, well, how's that possible? Well, think about it. Most of the time, when you're 18, you're probably told you're going to get kicked out the house, which is insane because you're literally going from high school to supposedly having it all figured out the very next day. I was thinking about this, but when I was 12, my parents, Dexter Sr. and Della Peggins, they used to tell me, hey, when you're 18, you up out of here, buddy. And so, by the time I was 18, it was on and popping. But here's the thing. I tell people all the time, I thank God for the military because honestly, I was not ready for the transition. Ultimately, the military is served as a bridge or blanket for me to get this thing called manhood figured out. At least it served as a canopy as I was working out a few things that I thought belonged to manhood. The military, what it did for me, it in essence, it became the voice of a parent. They gave me clothes, they gave me a place to stay, i.e., the barracks. Put a few dollars in my pocket. It wasn't nothing to write home about, but the reality was is that in that initial phase from transitioning out of high school into the military, there was a window of time in which, look, I was making a lot of mistakes, but I had the protection or the safety blanket of being in the military to cover me while I was working out those issues. However, one thing that I do know is that this is not the experience of every man. There are a lot of men who had to learn what it means to be a man or what the expectations of manhood were. They had to learn these things on the fly. And as a consequence, life has not always been the kindest in understanding their disposition of what it means to try to figure out this title or this role of manhood. As a man, there are a few things that I'm aware of. I like to think more than a few, but in my 40 plus years of living, there are a few things that I've really identified as some kind of key facets uh, as it pertains to manhood. The first thing that I will share before you is this. For all of us, God deemed it necessary for us being here. He deemed it necessary for me to be born in the year 1979 and still being here in 2023. And so, what we have the responsibility of is we have the responsibility to find out what makes us necessary. What is our contribution to creation? That's an eternal question that we all must answer and figure out. The second thing that I will put before you is something that I call the survivability quotient. When you think about it, I want you to take a look around. But when you look at social programs, most of the social programs are designed to assist women and children, and rightfully so. This implies that society has determined that men should have it figured out. They should have their act together. And so this enforces the attitude that you got to be able to go out there and get it, because if you don't, you will not survive. And that's the construct of our world. The other thing, I guess you can call this the third point, is safety and security. We have a responsibility to be able to not only protect ourselves, but also be able to protect those whom which we're responsible for. If you think about it, and this might be some old data, or this is some old data. It's been a while since I actually checked up on the stats, but at one point in time, it took police in a major city about 7 minutes to respond to any crime or any life-threatening situation. And so, in that time frame, as a man, do you have the ability to not only protect yourself, but also those who you're responsible for? The fourth thing that I will put before you is that our life is a reflection of decisions that we make in the areas of health, finances, relationships. And if you don't like what you have, you don't have the benefit of being able to blame somebody else, because the reality is reflective of your own decisions, which suggests that we can make changes by thinking differently and making different moves with our own lives. And at the heart of these four areas that I just highlighted, it suggests that for men, we have a responsibility to identify our own internal leadership. Uh, and here's the beautiful thing about it, or here's the sobering thing about it. You should be able to do that prior to insisting that someone else trust your leadership. You should have your own internal leadership figured out before you hope to be able to lead somebody else. So, with that being said, listen, I'm going to take a quick commercial break and we will be right back.
There is a prevailing crisis that has crippled families and communities for decades. This crisis has a direct association to higher crime rates, increased poverty, and cost the nation millions of dollars annually. The crisis is the epidemic of fatherlessness. What would the world look like if fathers were not only physically present, but emotionally available as well? What would the conversation between the repentant father and the dejected son sound like? Recognizing that sons, both young and old, need to hear a heart of a father serves as the motivation for this literary work. This book is for those who need wisdom and guidance, never had those necessary moments with their father, or wish they had more moments with their father. Through the affirmation of a father's love, this book will traverse the difficult path from disappointment to hope, and from alienation to reconciliation.
That was the commercial for my book, Dear Son, The Words of a Father to the Heart of a Son. I had the opportunity to release that Father's Day 2020. And listen, I'm really proud of what that book has accomplished thus far. You can get that from Amazon or my website, dexterpegginsjr.com. Listen, oftentimes people assume because a man is in his 20s, 30s, 40s, and older, that he has the manhood thing figured out. But the reality is that's not always the case. A lot of men did not have the example of a father, and so they are operating with limited data. And so I hope that through that book, it is able to cover some ground for men looking for that affirmation concerning their manhood, and also to really serve and help others who are trying to figure out the men in their lives. A lot of women have reached out to me and told me how beneficial it's been for them to understand the men in their lives, and even to understand how their own fathers were or maybe were not there for them. And so, once again, feel free to get a copy of that book. I would greatly appreciate it. But listen, back to this conversation of missing in action. I want to start this segment off by asking the fellas out here a question. Men, let me ask you, do you feel like you are fully present in the things that you are supposed to do? Or do you feel like you're fully present in the things that you're supposed to be as it pertains to aspiring to become a certain thing? Earlier, I gave my explanation of where I've been. And the reality was is that I was dejected. Uh, I'm not ashamed to admit it. I was disappointed because I had expectations concerning business and relationships that did not pan out how I thought they would pan out. And in terms of some of those relationships, I felt like I had committed a lot of energy in those relationships without any reciprocity. And it felt like I was experiencing burnout as a result of what it was that I was committing, but not receiving uh, in regards to those relationships. And ultimately, I needed to pull back. I needed to take a step back because I did not want to have these feelings of feeling like I was being overwhelmed, or as the expression goes, I didn't want to feel a certain kind of way towards people. But here's the thing: in reality, it wasn't so much about the people as it was that I was not using the necessary tools that I knew were available to me to make sure that I was okay. Maybe in those moments, what I needed was counsel. Maybe I needed therapy. Maybe I needed to offload the plate because I was simply doing too much. And so now, after that time of hiatus, I'm able to come back 100%, understanding the downfalls, understanding where I missed some of the things. And now I'm in position to come and ask my brothers, hey guys, are you missing in action concerning the things that you're supposed to do? Um, and if you are, let me ask you this: what's keeping you from getting back in the fight? In essence, a lot of us are the walking dead. I don't know if you're familiar with the show. It was one of my favorite shows when the first three seasons, but it started to go left towards the end. But I stuck with it because I wanted to see how everything was going to wrap up. But if you're familiar with the show, it's dealing with the zombie apocalypse. You have these zombies walking in herds, looking to devour the living. And from a symbolic standpoint, while there are no literal zombies roaming the streets, there are a lot of people who still have breath in their lungs and activity in their bodies. But what they're doing is they're going through the motions of life. They're not living the life that they believe belongs to them. And so, in essence, they become the walking dead. And my question to you is: do you find yourself as a part of that horde? Are you amongst the walking dead? And even if you look at it from the context or within the scope of what we're talking about today, have you found yourself missing in action? Are you the one who began something great, but for whatever reason, you've allowed life to get in the way? Maybe you felt like the responsibilities of the things that you're carrying, they begin to dim the light of what it was that you've been called to impact. And what I want to tell you is simply this: it is a necessity for you to get back to work because there are people depending upon what you have. One of the hats that I get to wear is that of a life coach. Not only life coach, I do a lot of leadership development type things. And one of the things that I often tell my clients is you cannot negate your experiences. No matter how difficult they were, they become a blueprint of sorts to help other people, because what you can do through your learned experiences, you can help people overcome their own difficulties. And so the reality is, guys and gals, or whoever's listening, there's things that you have that you've been through that can be a benefit to so many other people, but you have to be willing to get back to it. The reality is that the world needs what you have to offer. Even in today's quote, there are times when convenience robs men of courage. Listen, for many of us, for a number of us, we worked ourselves into a position where life is good. And listen, there's no need to apologize if you are one who has positioned yourself in such a way where life is good. But here's the thing, because life is good, oftentimes there is no motivation to do the hard thing. But it's the hard things that often reveal the measure of the man. Am I willing to serve the world or the community when I have everything that I need? Where's the motivation to go out there and do the things knowing that I might get rejected? Where's the real motivation? And I contend that the motivation is the knowing that you have a responsibility to go out there and do it. And so, even though everything is good in my home, uh, the question is, am I overlooking or neglecting the impact that I can make beyond the confines of my house? And it's in this moment that we must remember that convenience is not an excuse to not demonstrate courage. Convenience does not give me the right to not be courageous. As I mentioned earlier, I have the benefit of serving as the executive director of a nonprofit organization. That organization is City of Refuge Enterprise, where we provide mentorship services for at-risk youth. And one of the funniest things that I always encounter when working with some of the young men is there's this period or this season of them sizing you up. Where they're like wondering, okay, who is this guy and why does he want to help me? And the reality is that this sizing up is not them disliking you. What it is that they've heard the narrative from other people that I'm just here to help. They've heard that before. But what they're doing in this sizing you up is they're measuring you against the inconsistency of someone else who has gone MIA, because they've heard it before, and because they're hearing it now again. They're recalling the time that someone else went missing in action on them, and so they are measuring you against that person's inconsistency. And so what they're saying is, how consistent will you be with me if I'm able to trust myself with you? You know, the reality is that adds a greater sense of responsibility and weight concerning the things that we're called to do, those difficult things that require courage for us to step out and say, you know what, I know I'm supposed to do this. Someone once told me something, and I'll share this with you in closing. They said that you only experience resistance in the movement. If you're stationary, you're not going to experience any resistance. But it's in the stepping forward, it's in the proactively going towards a thing that you begin to experience resistance. What I want to tell you, gentlemen, is this: don't read resistance as you not doing what you're supposed to do. Acknowledge resistance as you're making progress. And the reality is that whatever thing that you've been called to do, whether it be with your family or in the community or whatever, the fact that you're being present and you're actively striving to make things better, even though you might be experiencing some degree of adversity, allow that to be the inclination, the sign that yes, you are doing the right thing. Yes, you are making progress. And with that being said, I am back in this fight. We have a responsibility here in Truth of the Matter, and I will see this through to its rightful conclusion. And so, with that being said, I want to say thank you for joining me on this day. And I'm looking forward to what we're going to accomplish in the days and weeks ahead. So listen, whether you're here with me on social media or on whatever streaming platform that you may be hearing this podcast, we got work to do, and let's get it. I look forward to hearing and speaking with you on the next episode. Take care and God bless.
Speaking truth and power, unlocking minds, one day at a time, day at a time. Speaking truth and power, unlocking minds, one day at a time, day at a time. Truth of the matter is that truth really matters, yeah. Truth of the matter is that truth really matters, yeah. In the beginning, I was back and forth like badminton, lacking wisdom, no direction for proper decisions. I heard my bro had a show, so I started to listen. Truth of the matter, ain't no comparing the competition. The kid feeling blessed, cause it's clear as when Dex. After talking with Dex, I know just where to step. I know the path gon' be narrow, but my eyes on the sparrow. And the truth of the matter is that truth really matters. Truth of the matter, that truth really matters. Hey, truth of the matter.